So now let's start with the practical session. So I am using here IntelliJ, and I'm going to create a new project. So I will go to module and I will select the Spring Boot module. And so my project is with the GraphQL. So I will name it as GraphQL demo, and the workspace you can select whatever you want. I will keep it a custom workspace. Language here is Java, and I'm selecting it type as a Maven, and I will keep the group name as GraphQL. Okay, so I'm using Java 17 version, and it's a jar packaging. Click on next, and I will get the option to choose what all dependencies I want as a starter. So I will select Lombok. In the web, I will select web first, then Spring for GraphQL, and I will also select some of the dependencies of the H2 database for doing the database operations. Okay, so I think we have got some of the dependencies here, and if we require any others, we'll be trying to add it at later stage. So just click on create, and my project is created. Okay, so is my project listed here? Yeah. So this is my project GraphQL demo, and let's go to the form XML. There we have some of the dependencies. I'm using the Spring version as 3.4.3, and Spring Boot Starter GraphQL, Spring Boot Starter Web, S2, Lombok, Test, and Web Reflex. Basically, when you are making a GraphQL project, a Spring Web Reflex will be added, because GraphQL will not work if you don't have this dependency, Spring Web Flux. Okay, so now let's get started with the source files. So we need to create a user. So this is our main application. The application starts. Okay, the run method. Now we are going to create a package which will be having model. As we saw in the PPTs, we were using a user model. So we will create a user model. Okay, so in the user class, let's have some of the annotations. So we'll use these annotations. This is entity. So we need to add a Spring Boot Starter Data JPA to our class path in the form XML. You can edit from here, or in the form XML, if you go, you will be able to see Spring Boot Starter Data JPA. You can add this dependency, and your user entity will be imported. For add the table, we have to import it, and we have to import from the persistence, Jakarta persistence. Okay. And now in the users, this is the table name users. And in the users, we'll have some of the fields. Let's say we are having private long ID, then we'll have private string name, then email, and we'll have a post. Okay. Now this ID we are having as a primary key. So we'll make it as ID, and the generated value should be identity. And the post, let's say we have another nested post class. So we'll create this post class. So you can go to more actions and you can create a class. In the same model, we will be creating it. And in the post class, we'll have some of the fields. And these fields will be a long ID, a title of the post, and the content. That is a string. I will also have at the entity, and we need getters. So this is generated by a Lombok, and we'll have setters. So we'll have a constructor at the rate no arg constructor, and the relation between the post user post should be many to one, one to many. So we are going to have the relation between the post and the user, that is many to one, and we are joining on the column user ID. And in the post class, we are going to refer the user entity. So the reference here is many to one, and join column at user ID. So okay, both are many to one. Fine. So our user is created, post is created. Okay, so now we are going to create a user repository. So in the repository, we'll create a new package, that is a repository, and we'll create a user repository. So this will be an interface. and we'll be extending the JPA repository. Let me import some of the necessary classes. Okay, so our user repository is in place now. Now, in order to run this application, we also need to have a bean in place. That is this particular bean, GraphQL Source Builder Customizer. So basically this will be taking a user repository and it will be using the builder to configure the runtime winding. It will be filing the query with a type winding. So on the users table, it will be doing a user repository dot find all. So we are almost done with the application setup. Only we need to have a controller in place, and this will not be our REST controller. It will be a @controller. So we'll name it as GraphQL query controller, and in here we'll be marking it as a controller. Okay, and we will be having some of the queries in here. So instead of the REST endpoints, we'll be having some of the queries. Basically, the queries that we will be filing on the user repository, we need to have a user repository here. Okay, and we will also have a constructor injection. So public, okay. So this is a constructor injection, and now we'll have some of the queries. So here we'll be having two queries. Basically a query mapping annotation. We'll be having a query mapping where this users method will be returning a list of users from doing a find all. In the other one we'll be having find user by ID. So it will be user ID that will be returned, find by ID. So these are default methods provided by the JPA repository. Okay. And one more change I would like to do is I want to make it a list of posts. And we will make some changes onto this particular annotation. So it should be mapped by user and page type is lazy. Okay, so we are done with our application and now it's time to run our application. Okay, so we'll go to the main application. Here it's better to keep this in a controller, so I will create a package called controller and I will put this query controller in here, and let's try to run this particular class. Okay, so we have got this exception where it says, let's go from the beginning. It's good that we got some exceptions. So here we can see error in creating the bean with router function mapping. So we need to make some more changes in our application. It's not able to find the schema. So we need to define a schema in here, and that will be in the resources folder. There is a GraphQL, and in this one we need to define a new file, and that file will be naming it as schema.graphqls, and in this one we'll be putting some of the things like type queries. So it will be type user, and with that we'll be defining the user, what all things it has a name, email, and a post, and inside the post we have a nesting of the post. So this post refers to the type here post, which is having an id string content. It has a mapping of user, which is here, and there is a type called query which is having a user. We can find all the users and we can find a user based on the id, and the properties we need to have some of the things like the application name, and we'll have some more things like a spring graphql graph iql enable true, and GraphQL path is GraphQL. Okay, and as we are using the S2 database, we need to have some of the properties of the S2 database. So we can see in the console, we'll be adding these following properties in the application properties to see our S2 database. Okay, save it. Now let's try to run our application once again. So okay, so this time the application is started, and as you can see it's started on port 8080, and we can use this particular console to see our S2 database. So let's go to, so this is the S2 console, and let's test the connection. The connection is successful. Let me connect to the DB. So as you can see we have a user, post, and a users table. Now currently the table will be empty. So if you run this particular command, there is no records in the table. Now let's try to hit the request with the user postman. So let me open postman. GraphQL request, we can go to new, and there is a GraphQL option in the postman. So I have already created it. So here you can put this particular endpoint, that is 8080 GraphQL. So in the query, you need to pass this particular query. So when you say query, it will be giving you a data that is null currently because there is no data inside. And the thing is, the first time when you send the query request with this particular query, you will be able to see the response, and along with that you will be able to see this particular queries populating in here. So you can select this from here, what you want and what you don't want. Accordingly you can modify the query, and then you can get the result. So currently it's the data is empty, so you are getting a empty result. So let's try to add some of the data in the database. So let's put id as 123, email as abcd@gmail.com, city. Okay, id is 1. Okay, let me put one more, that is 2 something, and abc. Okay, the same we'll do in the post. Okay, we go to edit plus, and we'll give one content something, title, and user id. Okay, well, let's add 2 and 2. Fine. Now let's go to our postman and try to get the users, all the users query. So if you can see, you have got all the users here, 1 and 2. If you want the post also, you can select the post, which post, what all things in the post you want. If you don't want the content, only the title, you can just query it, you will get the post. So the post is currently coming as null. You can get the user by id, you can select the id. If you want to give the pass the argument which id you want, you can just query it here. So let me remove these users. So I'm getting it by id 1. So for one id, I will be getting all the details of the user. Now, if I want the post as well, so I can get the post. So some problem here. So it's a posts, and what we have in our application here, let's check that. So in the application, we have user post. Okay, so let me change it to posts. I will again restart it, and let me file the request from the postman. Okay, since it's an in-memory database, when we restart the application, all our data will be gone. So let's try to run this particular query to insert some of the data. Okay, so it's inserted. Now when we query here, you will be able to see the posts as well for all the users. And now if you want to get the particular user, let's say user 1, and you want to get the post of that particular user, you don't want the content, then you can file the query. And if you can get the post, you haven't got the content. If you want to select the content, you will get the content. So nothing more, nothing less. Okay, I hope you like the video. At least it gives you a clear picture of how to use the GraphQL. If you like the video, you can write some of the comments and feedbacks, and if there is any kind of doubt or you want any kind of new tutorials, you can always write that into the comment section. Yeah, thanks for watching. See you next time.